It's the Real News Network. I'm Greg Wilpert, joining you from our studios in Baltimore. On Tuesday, Italy's parliament is confirming a new coalition government between the populist and right-wing League Party and the center-left and also populist Five Star Movement. Italy had held parliamentary elections in early March, and it took months of negotiations for the two parties to come to an agreement. Just last week, it seemed like the agreement had been torpedoed by Italy's president, Sergio Mattarella, who had refused to accept the coalition's anti-Euro finance minister. He instead nominated a former IMF economist as a caretaker government until new elections would be held. However, the two parties subsequently agreed to a slightly different cabinet, and now the coalition will move forward after all. Joining me from Rome to discuss the situation in Italy is Luciana Castellina. Luciana is a co-founder of the Italian newspaper Il Manifesto. She has been a deputy both in the Italian Chamber of Deputies and a member of the European Parliament. She has published numerous books in Italian about Italian politics, and her latest book in English, published by Verso, is a memoir titled Discovery of the World, A Political Awakening in the Shadow of Mussolini. Thanks for joining us today, Luciana.
Well, while I'm answering you, I'm watching the TV which is showing the debate, the discussion, which is going on in the parliament right at that moment, because there is the discussion about the government. And it's really a very hilarious scene because, the Five Stars, which has presented itself as a completely change, a renewal of everything, finish with the old politics and so on, it's proposing a government which is full of the oldest, worst stuff of the traditional right. It's not a group of naive young people who won't be able to rule, as it has been said. It's within the government there are all the old men of the power of the right, and in this sense it is really something which you would not have expected in a way. And, there is little to say, It is very rarely you have seen such a change from an electoral campaign to the government. I mean, such an unbelievable and total change of attitude and proposals and culture and everything. Unfortunately, the Five Stars have become, have had such great support, and mainly among young people, because they have presented themselves as really the force of change, the image of change. And many of the left have voted for the Five Stars because they were, really, they didn't want to know about the government, which was officially a government of what used to be the left, and it's no longer the left. So this is the great imbroglio, which took place. And of course there is a real left, but it's small and disoriented because of this confusion which has existed. The government, which we had before, was the government of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the continuation of what used to be the Communist Party. It merged with the Christian Democrats, and their initiative, their policy has been against the trade unions' laws and rules, which were against the workers. The worst.
So, Luciana, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just wondering, like you're pointing out, this is a very strange coalition between a left populist movement, that is the Five Star Movement, and the former Northern League, now called just the League, which is basically a right-wing populist movement organization. What kinds of policies can we expect from such a strange combination of left and right, and both promising change and both promising to be anti-establishment? What kinds of policies can we expect from this coalition?
You see, what is interesting is that the establishment the so-called liberal establishment is not here. I mean, it's a little bit like what happened in America, you see. I mean, these are people who believe to think against the establishment, but even if the people of the establishment are no longer there, the liberal establishment, let's say, the same defense of the real powers are represented. This is why they found so easily an agreement. Of course, they ask for giving more pensions to the people who retired, to correct a law which had been made by the previous government, which was very bad for the people who retired. So now they will promise to give them more money, but at the same time, they take away the taxes to the rich people, And this is so they do both, which is of course impossible. And then they try to say that the guilt, if something doesn't work, is because of Europe. Europe has its responsibility, certainly, but it's also a very nice way out to say that it's Brussels. It's Brussels' responsibility instead of saying that it is the Italian powers, let's say, the Italian establishment. So it's real. It's rarely we have seen such a confusion, But it's a little bit like Macron. Even Macron says no left, no right, and he came out like a new man of change. And then you have seen demonstration in France every day made by the trade union, by the students, and so on. So it's a little bit the same game. Of course, France is much stronger than Italy, so the game is not so open like it is in Italy.
Well, speaking of the role of the European Union, and you mentioned, of course, Macron, who's taking also in France, the president of France, who's taking this kind of dualistic kind of, or how should I say, this no left, no right kind of approach. But just let's look a little bit at what the role of the European Union versus what domestic issues in Italy have led to the situation of what amounts to really a very, at least what seems like an anti-establishment election result, and that promotes a left-right kind of coalition. What is it that led to this? Is it the policies of the European Union, or is it more something that is happening within Italy that is rooted in domestic issues and problems?
You see, well, the question, once the left was easily legitimized, you have the workers, and on the other side, you had the bosses. And the vote was simplified. Today, the decomposition of the labor force has been so large, and it is not just a split, a deep composition, because every worker has a different status. You don't have the large working class geographically concentrated in the same factory, all in the same condition. In the same factory, you have 5 or 6 kind of agreements because a lot of work is going outside. It's outsourced. Then you have a lot of social figures which are just precarious, fragmented individuals. Take Uber, the taxi, or take the riders. And, it's very difficult to represent socially these people because they're all split, fragmented. The labor force is like a soup, a soup with a lot of pieces in it. And this has given to the vote, the vote became much more confused, because it's difficult to represent in a collective way, there is no collectivity anymore. There are just individuals. And this had also cultural consequences. If you have a different social position, you also have a different culture. And all these who work horrible conditions because they have no agreements and no trade union protection, but they feel themselves free, independent, just because it it's a fake dependent job. It is in reality a dependent job, but there is the impression not to be. Take drivers and logistic and all this stuff. And I think it will take a long time for the left to be effective again, because if you don't go through a social recomposition of those who are exploited, even the political vote becomes completely confused. I mean, there is a reason. It's true that there is 1% of rich and 99% which are on the other side. But it's very easy for the 99% to have a common protest. But as soon as you go to a project, an alternative, this 90% splits in a variety of different social, political, and cultural figures. And this is what happened in all societies. You realize in Europe, the percentage of the traditional working class, manufacturer, is 8%, nothing. Only Germany has more, has practically the double. But this is true in France, in Spain, in Italy, and so on. So I think we have to be aware that we are facing a very deep historical crisis. And it's not just, craziness of an irrational vote. And Italy is always, in a way, historically, the vanguard of new phenomenon. We have invented capitalism in Italy, and then we invented fascism, and here now we are experiencing this this soup, which is these two groups together. And it was very easy for the five stars to change immediately their position, and just to say, I don't know how much they will last, but they will last because they will find a way to, the point is that there is no position with the defend, so this is why they can last, because there is no strength in those who should oppose this kind of imbroglio, you see.
And your point about this being applicable to many other countries, I think, is very well taken, and we've seen a similar phenomenon certainly around Europe and even in the United States. It's, even though one couldn't say necessarily that the five-star movement is similar to Bernie Sanders, but it seems like it would be as if Sanders hadn't gone into a coalition with Donald Trump, is what's happening in Italy right now. I'm not sure, but in any case, it's certainly a very curious situation. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there for now. I was speaking to Luciana Castellina, co-founder of the Italian newspaper Il Manifesto and former member of Italy's parliament. Thanks again, Luciana, for joining us today.
Bye. Bye.
And thank you for joining the Real News Network.